Ultimately, and this needs to be kept in mind by regulators worldwide, it's regulation which, in the long run, has to adapt to technology and not the other way around.
Bulls lead the way? Malta's role in the age of DeFi. What has happened since Malta launched its world-renowned DLT regulatory framework? Let's find out. Jonathan Galea, Blockchain Advisory.
So, good morning, everyone. I know we're painfully close to the lunch hour, so I promise I'll keep it short, entertaining, and informative as well. We're hearing a lot about DeFi, decentralized finance. It seems to have become the latest buzzword. But really and truly, what does DeFi mean? We're using it as an all-encompassing term for a lot of things which might or might not be related to DeFi. So in order to ensure we're all on the same page, I'm just going to run you quickly through what decentralized finance actually means. Ultimately, we're talking about conventional financial tools that are built on blockchain technology. And so far, I'll say that the most popular platform has proven to be Ethereum, with quite a lot of projects being structured on top of this blockchain. Unlike some other projects which utilize blockchain technology, we're not going for an all-out decentralized approach when it comes to DeFi products. In fact, we're seeing a hybrid approach being undertaken with a mix of blockchain conventional financial structures being used for most of such DeFi products. It's also being alternatively termed as open finance because ultimately it is censorship resistant or aims to be censorship resistant, and ultimately also provides improved open access to financial services. Some examples of DeFi applications. Open lending protocols, peer-to-peer lending protocols. Ultimately, again, we're seeing the emergence, or rather more prominence, for peer-to-peer lending protocols, microfinancing, if you want. Issuance platforms and investing. Again, we're moving towards a stage whereby if you want to issue your own financial product, it's becoming more open to the public, more open to, let's say, the retail industry as well. So when it comes to actually issuing such kind of products, inclusivity is becoming more and more common. Decentralized prediction markets, like Augur, whereby, again, there's some overlap with betting platforms, but ultimately it's more centered towards, let's say, the financial side of things when we use the term prediction markets. Exchanges, open marketplaces, so decentralized exchanges, hybrid decentralized exchanges, whereby you see some exchanges, for example, shifting the custodianship function onto the users themselves and keeping certain other elements in a centralized manner. And also stablecoins. So far, we've mostly seen collateralized stablecoins, also some partly collateralized stablecoins, but ultimately, if we want to move towards decentralization, then I would say that non-collateralized stablecoins might start emerging in the near future. Challenges for DeFi. I would say that the challenges at this moment in time are mostly of regulatory nature. Ironically, because DeFi is presenting a lot of challenges to regulation itself, seeking to address certain deficiencies in the regulatory framework. We're seeing certain products emerging which are not catered for in traditional regulation. How do we deal with these? Do we keep them unregulated? Do we extend current regulation? Do we create a new regulatory framework altogether? We're also seeing the hybrid approach being undertaken because ultimately there are certain central elements that right now cannot circumvent regulation, or rather should not circumvent regulation. The comment which normally pops up is, well, if you don't want to be regulated, then don't be regulated. But ultimately, for example, if we're talking about a platform, an exchange, which lists an asset that ultimately, let's say, has been brought about by some irregular practices, then what should be stopping the regulators from coming after you and asking you to take it off the platform, because ultimately you're promoting malpractice? Again, these are questions which are trying to be answered by certain regulators across the world. There should also be certain open clashes, which, in my opinion, should be avoided at this time. If one were to apply the infamous dark test, if you try to package something which is ultimately very similar or the same as a traditional financial instrument, and you simply try to get away from regulation, claiming that you're using blockchain technology, the regulators will not fall for that. But if you package something in such a way that it retains most of the main benefits of traditional financial instruments, but they do not have all the critical criteria to be classified as financial instruments, well, there you go. A new instrument, presenting most of the benefits of traditional financial instruments, using blockchain technology, but existing outside the legal framework which is currently in place. That's the power of DeFi. Ultimately, and this needs to be kept in mind by regulators worldwide, it's regulation which, in the long run, has to adapt to technology and not the other way around. If regulators worldwide fail to understand this, they'll ultimately fail in the long run. So what is Malta's role in DeFi, in this new wave of emerging technology? First of all, we have provided a robust framework for the regulation of financial services side of blockchain technology. Some have said it is too robust, but ultimately we're dealing with a new industry. And while overregulation may stifle innovation, at the same time, we also need to monitor any developments in the space closely. Rather than driving it underground, we want to be there when the innovation takes place. And we want to provide a safe environment, mostly for users and investors. There's a rollout of the FinTech regulatory sandbox by the MFSA next year. Should be quite early on next year, ultimately giving an environment in which startups and companies with innovative ideas, especially in DeFi space, can actually test and have their products being operated in a controlled environment. We're also targeting new DeFi business models that can grow under supervision and support of the MFSA. So although the current VFA framework targets specific VFA services, it is envisaged that this framework will continue growing and also include within its remit other services not currently targeted under the VFA framework. The focus is always on ensuring the quality of the technology being used in these DeFi models. Malta, I would say, is the only jurisdiction which also mandates a technical audit of the platforms which are being licensed here in Malta. So apart from obtaining your license as a VFA exchange, for example, you would also need to undergo technical audit to ensure your systems are of the highest standards. There's also work, and it's been in the pipeline for quite a while, on creating new legal entity models in order to accommodate the new wave of DeFi. We understand that current legal infrastructures, such as limited liability companies, might not work for each and every model being presented to us. So we're also stretching the boundaries of what can be done legally and from a regulatory perspective in order to account for these changes and for these emerging models. I often get asked, has Malta stopped developing anything in this space? Where's all the hype about the blockchain island gone? What happened to it? Has everything stopped? The answer is no. We have continued developing the framework. We have not been idle in this past year. In fact, last week, we've had 34 letters of intent being submitted to the MFSA applying for a VFA service provision license. And that's just the first step. We're going beyond that. We're always working on refining the framework, always on the lookout for ways and means of how to actually make the framework applicable to this day and age. There's constant monitoring and supervision being done to improve the framework, and we aim to build on the successes and learn from the mistakes. Because at the end of the day, we still mean to keep Malta as one of the leading regulators when it comes to, again, regulating innovation. And innovation is time-consuming and risky. We will get there. but we need time in order to understand the growing needs of the industry, to understand what is ultimately required to build a robust framework. At the end of the day, we know that this industry is growing, but at the same time, we understand as well that there have been various incidents in the past in this industry. We don't want Malta to be a playground for those, let's say, projects which leave a lot to be desired when it comes to actually doing their homework and making sure that their project is structurally safe. We want to ensure that Malta only opens its doors to those projects which ultimately aim to be here in the long run, aim to have something in place which will serve future generations, rather than being the next BitConnect, to be very blunt. We want to provide a safe regulated environment. There are other jurisdictions. If you want to set up in 2 weeks and get a license, Malta's not a jurisdiction. So if you're here, you're in it for the long run, just as we are. Feel free to get in touch after the presentation. I'll be here in these 2 days, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.